If you think Hitler was evil, just wait until you hear about the king, who might have been even worse. He called it philanthropy. He called it progress. But beneath the veneer of benevolence lay a sinister reality. King Leopold II of Belgium, a man of calculated charm and insatiable greed, carved his name in blood across the heart of Africa. His ambition knew no bounds, and his methods were ruthless. This is the story of the Congo Free State, a land not free but enslaved. A land where the promise of progress was a cruel illusion, not prosperous but bled dry, its wealth siphoned off to fuel the ambitions of a distant king. A land where millions perished beneath the weight of one man's ambition. Lives were shattered, communities destroyed, and a rich culture was trampled underfoot. Leopold, a monarch with a lust for empire, saw in the Congo a chance for personal enrichment on a scale never before imagined. His greed was insatiable, his methods brutal. The Congo, a vast and resource-rich territory, became his personal fiefdom, a place where the natural beauty of the land was overshadowed by the horrors inflicted upon its people. A place where human life was cheap and rubber was king. The demand for rubber drove a regime of terror where the whip and the chain were tools of the trade. It is a story of unimaginable cruelty, of systematic brutality, and of a silence that allowed evil to flourish. The world turned a blind eye, and in that silence the darkness grew. King Leopold II remains largely unrecognized by many. Some believe that the lack of attention given to his actions is due to the fact that his victims were primarily Africans. He was responsible for the deaths of approximately 15 million people, marking one of the worst atrocities in history. Leopold reigned as the King of the Belgians from 1865 to 1909. In his youth, there was little to suggest anything insincere about his character. However, everything changed when he assumed control over the Congo in 1885. During the late 1800s, Africa was ruled by Europe's great powers, seeking to exploit its valuable resources, driven by greed and a desire for dominance. The British Empire claimed territories in the south, northeast, and parts of the northwest, while the French took control of the northeast and Madagascar. Additionally, the Italians, Portuguese, and Germans acquired the remaining lands, with the Congo presenting itself as the most challenging area to conquer due to its remote location far from the coast and the dense jungle surrounding it. Leopold, a master manipulator, decides to acquire the remaining land, fully aware of its abundance of natural resources. He presented himself as a benevolent patron. He spoke eloquently of philanthropy and progress. For the millions of Africans who lived in Congo, he promised to bring civilization and progress to the Congo Basin, a land rich in resources but largely unknown to Europeans. However, the true nature of his plans for the people of the Congo was far from beneficial to their well-being. The Congo Free State was born, a state in name only, a facade for Leopold's personal empire. It was a brutal regime where exploitation was the rule. In reality, it was a vast labor camp, a place of unimaginable suffering. Millions of indigenous people, their lives and livelihoods brutally upended, were forced into servitude. Millions perished from exhaustion, disease, and starvation as they were forced to labor in the treacherous pursuit of gold, the hunting of elephants for their ivory, and the relentless harvesting of millions of acres of forest for rubber, three of the most prized commodities in the world at that time. These exploitative endeavors not only enriched King Leopold at the expense of countless lives, but also proved insufficient to satisfy his insatiable greed, leading him to resort to the abhorrent trade of Congolese slaves. European officials, oblivious or indifferent to the suffering, continued their administration, enforcing brutal quotas and punishments. Letters and documents from the time reveal the extent of the atrocities, painting a grim picture of exploitation and cruelty. Leopold ruled the Congo with an iron fist. He enlisted local inhabitants into his army of mercenaries, dubbing them the Force Publique, and incentivized them to turn against their own people. He meticulously handpicked the most loyal among them to govern specific regions of the country, granting them complete dictatorial control over their respective areas. The chicotte, a whip made of hippopotamus hide, became a symbol of Leopold's reign. Each lash tore through flesh, leaving victims mutilated and broken. A quota system, ruthlessly enforced, turned human beings into commodities. Villages were given impossible targets for rubber collection. Failure to meet these quotas was punishable by death, torture, or mutilation. Hands were severed, often from living victims, as gruesome proof of punishment. The severed hands, a chilling testament to Leopold's barbarity, were collected and piled high. Fear stalked the land. The Force Publique, Leopold's private army, terrorized the population. Composed of both European mercenaries and African conscripts, they became instruments of terror. Any attempt to escape resulted in the Force Publique mercilessly severing the limbs of their entire family. King Leopold's ruthless manipulation of the Congo's army ensured that their interests aligned with his own, driving them to relentlessly push their fellow countrymen to the brink of exhaustion and death. The wildlife too fell victim to this holocaust. King Leopold treated the entire jungles as his personal playground, indulging in the hunting of lions, elephants, and any other creatures that caught his fancy, often accompanied by his affluent companions. Missionaries, horrified by what they witnessed, sent reports back to Europe. These reports were filled with vivid descriptions of the atrocities they had seen, hoping to stir the conscience of the world. They spoke of mass killings, of torture on a scale never before imagined, of a systematic campaign of dehumanization. The Congolese people were subjected to brutal punishments for failing to meet rubber quotas, their hands severed as proof of their supposed failures. Their words, often dismissed as exaggerations, painted a grim picture of the reality on the ground. Despite the initial skepticism, the mounting evidence became impossible to ignore, and the world began to take notice. In 1960, the Congo finally broke free from tyranny and achieved independence, gaining control over its own destiny. Today, the scars of this dark chapter remain etched in the landscape and in the memories of the people. The legacy of Leopold's greed is a haunting reminder of the cost of unchecked ambition. The reign of King Leopold II of Belgium is arguably one of the most heinous genocides in history. To learn more about other historical atrocities, such as those in Congo, watch the next video.